Well, hello there, and thank you for joining me as we gather around the fire here. Thought I'd read you chapter 1 of Stop It, You're Scaring Me. Give you kind of an idea of what the book is like. The phone was ringing and ringing. Will someone please answer that? The sound of her own voice startled her. It was a shrill sound, involuntary, wrenched from deep inside her, floating and echoing down the long hallway outside her room. She shut the door. A feeling of unease swept over her. Closing her eyes, she leaned her back against the doorknob, her arms behind her, the fingers of one hand gripping the knob's cold, hard surface. Silently, her lips moving, she counted to 10. Everything's all right, she told herself. If no one wants to answer the phone, that's their business, not mine. It continued to ring somewhere down the hall. Then suddenly, it stopped. A sharp knock on her door, and she started. Miss Evans? Her mind was racing, and she grit her teeth to slow things down. Yes? Her voice was shaky. The doctor's ready for you, Miss Evans, came a male attendant's voice. Room 1A. Do you want me to walk down with you? No, she snapped, and then, softer, into the door. No, thank you. I'll be fine. Okay, ma'am. He's waiting whenever you're ready. I'm ready now, she wanted to scream. I've been ready for weeks, but no one listens to me. She stood still as the sound of the attendant's footsteps grew fainter and fainter, and finally were gone altogether. Then she stepped away from the door to glance at a reflection in the mirror. Such a pretty face. Long, flowing auburn hair. It is you, isn't it? She sucked air in between her teeth. No, she didn't hear that. That little voice inside her head that told her things she didn't like. She didn't hear that anymore. It was one of the reasons she knew she was cured. She waited, listening. The room had a hum to it. Perhaps the refrigerator. There was the noise of traffic out the window. Feeling a little better, she went back to her reflection, smoothing her hair a little, and then she noticed that faint pink line that ran from her left ear down to her chin. It's a scar, isn't it? Said the voice. Ignore it, she thought. Ignore it and it will go away again, just like it did before. She peered closer. The line down her cheek was so faint that if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't notice it. Maybe you're imagining it. She stepped away. Her hand shaking slightly, she picked up a small plastic medicine bottle. She popped the top and dumped 2 pills into her hand, shoved them into her mouth and swallowed them. One caught in her throat and she gagged, quickly moving to the sink. She ran water into a glass and gulped it down, grimacing as she felt it dislodge the pill. There. She put the top back on the medicine bottle and was startled to see the bottle was nearly empty. She'd have to get more. Yes, you will. But he'll know you're not cured. She pretended not to hear. Soon I won't need them anymore anyway, she thought. You'll always need them. She took a deep breath and set the bottle on the counter near the sink. Then, without pausing, she went right to the door, opened it, stepped into the hallway, and closed the door behind her. The latch clicked. Okay, she thought. I'm outside the room. Her heart pounding, she took a deep breath, walked quickly to the elevator, and pushed the call button. The doors opened in front of her, and she stepped inside. As they slid closed, an all too familiar sound made her look up. The phone was ringing again. The first thing she saw as she entered room 1A was that the chair pulled out for her was in front of the Rain Street window. Lightning flashed outside the glass, and she stopped, shutting her eyes. The doctor spoke, and she opened them quickly, remembering where she was. Good morning, Kathleen. Please sit down. Just a few questions for you, my dear. This is a big day for you, isn't it? I don't want to sit by the window, she thought, but her voice said, Yes, Dr. Lane. I've been waiting for this day. Kathleen sat in the chair by the window. She didn't like the dampness of the room or the hiss of the radiator. The doctor waited for her to get settled, looked through a sheaf of papers on his desk, and then cleared his throat. Kathleen, he asked, do you remember why you came here in the first place? Her head turned sharply, and she felt a tightness in her chest. He's asking that? Why would he ask that? Still, she knew she could say the next thing if she simply voiced the words while she exhaled. That way, they would just float out of her and not catch in her throat. I had a problem, she said. A nervous episode. That was easy, said the voice. You could do that again. I was not myself. Yes, he said gently, that's true. But do you remember why you had the nervous episode? She stared at him. Why would he ask that on the day she was leaving? On the day she was cured? She forgot the trick about exhaling. Why would I want to remember that? The doctor smiled at her. A kind smile, she thought. He pities you. Wouldn't it be better if I never thought of that again? Well, of course, it isn't something you'll want to dwell on or even call to mind, as you say. It's just that it's important before you go that you understand why you were here and why you don't need to be here any longer. There was a crash of thunder from outside the window. She wanted to be gone, out of here. Kathleen, do you understand what I mean? She blinked her eyes and felt something hot and wet spilling onto her cheeks. Yes, of course, she breathed. But it's so hard to think of those things. It breaks my heart. She looked down at the floor and saw the tears fall from her eyes. She didn't know why she said the last thing. It just came out. The doctor looked away. I see, he said. Well, it was a sad, terrible day. I'm not going to press you on it. And yes, this should be a happy day for you. Now you understand we've arranged for you to stay at a place on Lake Tahoe for the next few weeks, just to see how things go. All right? She knew that. She was all right with that. I like Lake Tahoe, she heard herself say. Oh? The doctor looked up, interested. You've been there before? Suddenly the tightness in her chest was back. Just exhale. Yes, she smiled. It's a beautiful lake. The doctor nodded, tapping the tips of his fingers together. How do you feel about all this? Nervous? She looked at him. What was the right answer to that? Should she admit it or pretend it wasn't so? I'm not sure. I'm excited, but at the same time... Ooh, that was very good, said the voice. Dr. Lane pushed the chair back away from his desk and stood up. Just remember, you won't be doing this entirely on your own. He was crossing over to her, his hand outstretched. She took it in hers and they shook. You won't be alone, he went on, and a doctor from our companion hospital at Tahoe City will look in on you. Thank you, doctor. He was walking with her to the door. Best of luck to you, Kathleen, he said. I know you're going to do well. That was it then. He was saying goodbye. The interview was over. What about your pills? Yes, what about them? She couldn't do without them, could she? Thank you, she said again. Ask about your pills. I can't, she thought. I can't. If I do, he'll know I'm still dependent on them, that I need them, that I can't make it on my own. Well, you can't. Dr. Lane noticed her hesitation. Is there something else you wanted to say? Any questions about all this? Now's your chance. He's asking you straight out. Tell him you need more of your pills. She tried to smile, but only a faint trace of one touched her lips. No, doctor, she said so softly he almost couldn't hear. No, just goodbye and thank you. Goodbye, he said. She turned to the door. The voice inside her head was silent now. Angry at her. She felt faint. I couldn't say it, she thought. I couldn't. But now what would she do when the nights were long and anxious moments crept into her soul? Her hand was on the doorknob. There was no going back. The door was open, and she was going through. Oh, Kathleen, Dr. Lane suddenly called out. Just a second. She stopped, but did not turn around. Her lip was quivering. How's your prescription? The prescription? She asked innocently. Oh, now that you mention it, I forgot. She turned to face him. I'm nearly out. Enough to get to Vikingsholm, do you think? She thought about that for a second, then nodded her head. Dr. Lane nodded his own head in satisfaction. Good, he said. I'm having it refilled for you up there. Our Dr. Holt will have it for you. His voice leaned on the name as if he expected some reaction from her. But if he did, he was disappointed. Thank you, doctor, she said. And then a daring idea came to her. Don't do it, said the voice. But, she went on, do you really think I still need to take them? There was a moment of silence and her heart sank. Had she gone too far? A bluff was one thing, but there was no way she could get through the days and nights ahead of her at a new and strange place without her medication, and she knew it. But apparently, so did he. I think for now we should just stay with it, the doctor said. We'll see how you do. A thrill went through her at his words, and she felt almost giddy. She took a deep breath and held her smile inside. All right then, doctor, if you think so. He nodded. Good luck, he said. The paper in her hand was to go to the nurse at the front desk. That was all right. She had to pass the front desk on her way to the elevator anyway. Dr. Lane said I should give this to you. The nurse looked at it briefly. She wore the crisp white uniform of the Institute, so different than the casual scrubs most nurses and even doctors wore in regular hospitals these days. Kathleen liked that. She liked things neat and proper and orderly. But the nurse wasn't wearing a white cap. Didn't they wear the white caps? She couldn't remember. I'll have a car pull round for you in about 10 minutes, said the nurse. And Kathleen saw she was a homely woman whose weight spoiled the effects of the uniform. Why don't you get packed and I'll ring you as soon as he's here? I am packed, Kathleen thought. I stayed up half the night. Her voice said, thank you, and she made her way to the elevator. She could hear the phone ringing when the doors opened on her floor. Wasn't anyone ever going to answer the damn thing? But as she drew near her door, she realized the ringing was coming from inside her room. He's here already, she thought, and felt a sudden excitement building in her. In a moment, she would be gone, away from this place. Since locking private rooms was not allowed, she simply had to turn the knob to enter and quickly went to the kitchen counter where the phone jangled in front of her. She scooped up the receiver and started talking even before it reached her ear. Hello, I'll be just a sec. But the sound from the earpiece was not what she expected. There was static and a muffled voice off in the distance that she could not understand. Hello? Hello? Is someone there? A voice ebbed in and out, drowning in the static. I'm sorry, this is a bad connection. I don't understand you. You'll have to call back. She hung up. The sudden silence in the room oppressed her. Why is it hard to breathe? A feeling akin to panic rose in her, and she quickly half carried, half dragged her suitcase out into the hall. But as soon as she closed the door, she realized she was missing something. The garment bag was still inside. I don't need it, she thought. I can do without it. But that wasn't true, and she knew it. She stood for a moment, catching her breath. And then, steeling herself against she knew not what, she slowly opened the door. The room looked just the same. It was just the rain outside the window that made it seem dim and cold. The garment bag lay where she had left it, draped over a kitchen chair. There's nothing wrong, she said to herself. Count to 10. She counted as she stepped into the room and walked deliberately toward the garment bag. She was 5 steps away. 3. 1. Her hand reached out for it and she jumped. The phone was ringing again. She could just let it go. She didn't have to answer it. She was leaving anyway, right? They must have just missed her, that was all. But the dread inside her wouldn't let go. She knew she had to find out who it was, what they wanted. Her hand trembled as she reached for the receiver, pulled it off its cradle, and brought it slowly up to her ear. Her eyes were closed. Hello? It was almost a whisper. Miss Evans, this is the desk. Your driver is here. Your driver is here to take you to the train station. Do you need help with your luggage? Yes, she found herself saying. Perhaps someone could come get my suitcase. It's right outside my door. I've got my garment bag. and she pulled the garment bag to her and slammed the door shut as she went out. Chapter 1.